But just to quickly introduce, Sarah was born and raised in Prince Rupert, Northern BC on Tsimshian territory. She holds a BA in English Literature with a minor in First Nations and Indigenous Studies and an MA in Interdisciplinary Studies from the University of British Columbia with a community-centered research background in Chinese and Indigenous relations on Musqueam territory. Sarah is the co-editor of Journeys of Hope, Challenging Discrimination and Building on Vancouver Chinatown's Legacies, and the lead producer of All Our Fathers Relations, the beautiful documentary that we just watched. Sarah is currently the exhibition and program manager for the Chinese Canadian Museum. She is an active volunteer in Vancouver Chinatown and serves as chair of the Chinese Canadian Historical Society of BC. She is co-founder of the online store Chinatown Wonders and the co-curator of Rivers Have Mouths, an exhibit now on view at the Dr. Sun Yat-sen Classical Chinese Garden. We also have a special surprise guest with us tonight, the artist behind the work that inspired this entire series, Karen Tam. She is 3 hours ahead of us, so a little bit late her time, but she lives and works in Montreal. Hello! And holds an MFA in sculpture from the the School of the Art Institute of Chicago and a PhD in cultural studies from Goldsmiths, the University of London. Her current solo exhibition, Autumn Tigers, as you might know, is an immensely important conversation that reflects on the history of Chinese culture in Canada and specifically in British Columbia. The show honors intercultural exchange, the labor and life of Chinese Canadians who have thrived and even under the pressures of systemic racism, violence, and discrimination. Her work often unearths stories that have previously been invisible, inspiring artworks born from the historical research. And I think that makes it a great pairing for this discussion on All Our Fathers Relations. So happy to have you both here tonight. Hello. Karen, I hope you're still awake. I know it's like 10:40 there. But yeah, Sarah, just to start off, I guess, before we get any questions in the chat, how did you get involved with the film? How did that start?
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's really a pleasure to join you this evening. Well, it's quite fitting that you screened 1788 and Cedar and Bamboo before the film, because that documentary was really, I think, pivotal in inspiring my journey to further explore this topic. I think part of my interest is that I was born and raised in Northern BC, where there is a deep-rooted history of relations between early Chinese migrants and the local Indigenous peoples. And I could see that in my own family history too. But coming here and being welcomed into the Musqueam community to work with them and share the Grant family story in particular has been really transformative. And when I watched that film, Cedar and Bamboo, back in 2010, which is already a decade ago, it just made me want to learn more. And so I spent my master's degree looking into this topic, and long story short, had the opportunity to follow the Grants on that once-in-a-lifetime journey back to their father's village.
Yeah, it sounds like it was amazing from what we could see, but like being there in the film crew yourself, like what was the impact of being present throughout that journey, both in Canada and China? Because you were participating in some level with the family discovery of their overseas connections, ancestral histories, like there was so much emotion to unpack there for my goodness. So from your perspective, how was it?
That time in China really flew by. As you might have noticed, we really only spent less than a day in the village itself. And yeah, the family was extremely emotional. Alejandro, who's the film director, and I were the only two-person camera team. So we were busy running around and trying to not only be in the moment, but capture the experience for them, because they did want to have this record for their family back here on Musqueam territory. So in a sense, it flew by, and I think it wasn't really until we all returned that we could unpack those emotions. And the Grants sat down for multiple interviews afterwards to really reflect on not only what that trip meant to them, but what they wanted viewers to learn about the experience of growing up as Chinese Indigenous and what built up to that moment. And as you heard from Howard, who is the main narrator in the documentary, it took him many years to even imagine going to his father's village. And I think it's really neat to see how much he has changed since those early days when he looks very young in Cedar and Bamboo. And then you can hear quite clearly that he still didn't feel he had any roots in terms of his paternal connection. And I think he was able to finally plant some firmer roots and a deeper understanding with his brothers when they went to China back in 2013. So it's really neat to see the films back to back.
Absolutely. I felt like it was a good little flow that we had there going on.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering, like, we saw a little bit in 1788 and Cedar and Bamboo that, you know, how family histories are often incomplete because of separations, for legal reasons, for social exclusion. I wonder if for you, because you said that you have some experience in your personal family heritage of it as well. I don't know, have you dug into your own history with it by any chance? Just completely out of curiosity.
Yeah, so my family is also Cantonese from the Guangdong province, so not too far away from where the Grants family's village is. And so I was sort of on my own parallel journey of looking into how it came to be that my great granduncle landed in Prince Rupert, which is a very small community in northern BC. And I spent a lot of time during my university years looking into that, and was fortunate to come across some history that a distant cousin of mine had documented. And what's really neat is that about a few weeks ago, I was on another film dialogue and I got to meet her virtually. So it's neat how this virtual pandemic experience can reconnect people. But yes, when I went to China with the Grants, I also got to meet many of my relatives in Hong Kong along the way for the first time. And so it's been interesting to reflect on, you know, who I am and where I come from. And I feel like that is one of the key messages that the Grants impart as knowledge keepers, that as much as they want people to acknowledge and learn about the lands and communities of Indigenous peoples, it begs people to think about, you know, who their ancestors are and what journeys brought them here to Canada as well.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Just a quick reminder, if anyone has any questions that you would like to ask, feel free to send them away.
It would be great if Karen joined the conversation too, although I know it's quite late. So thanks for joining us, Karen.
Karen, how you feeling?
Thank you so much for putting this program together. It was I watched the two first ones earlier today, and just all three together were just amazing set, and just really yeah, like you were saying, like really emotional and really moving, and just to a way of reflecting on, I guess, every aspect. So thank you, Sarah, for producing this documentary.
Well, thank you. It was really a pleasure to be part of it.
I have a question for both of you, because both of your works, like the documentary and the exhibit, both, they kind of tackle this huge obstacle that we have of erasure, right? Like erasure in history books, in the archives, in museums, and all of these things. And so I want to know, for you, what do you think we can do to combat the erasure of these stories, of both intercultural histories between Chinese and Indigenous communities on Turtle Island, but also just of general ancestry that we have? If you have any thoughts on that.
I guess one is to, in your own way, in one's own way of kind of start out by looking at your own family's history and what's known about your family's history, and what's not actually, what's been left unsaid. I guess the other thing I know for myself is that I do a lot of research in archives and collections, and then just sometimes, coming across different references and just really following up on that. And through the artworks, through installations, I try to bring some of those stories or hidden aspects of the histories to light. And to share that with folks. And sometimes the history that I'm looking at is not complete as well. So sometimes I'll, in a way, reimagine, so it's sort of speculative in a way, and to ask us to think about what might have happened and what could happen. And I think by highlighting and bringing to light some, I guess I'll just take an example, like Li Nam, who was a Chinese immigrant painter, lived in 1930s Victoria, Chinatown, and we only know him through Emily Carr's journals. And so I did this installation where kind of trying to, over a number of years, trying to find out more about this artist. So that's one way.
I think I would just add, finding ways to support people in their journey and carving out space to have those conversations. It would look different depending on our practice in the field, but certainly in my professional work, I try to find opportunities to create that platform or use that platform to guide people along. And it's really great to see initiatives unfolding, particularly here in the West Coast, but I think across Canada. For example, the Reclaim Your Name, where many notable people are being reflected and talking about the struggles they've had using their own ancestral names, whether it's in Cantonese or Japanese or another Asian language, and how the general public has treated us when we, seem to be different or of a different community. And so I think it's very powerful that people are encouraging one another to step into their own family history and be proud of who they are and their unique identity.
Absolutely. Those are two beautiful, well-articulated answers. Karen, you were talking a little bit about, using art to explore those histories. And I don't know, Sarah, if this might be a good opportunity for you to talk a little bit more about Rivers Have Mouths. I've only heard a little bit about it so far, but would love to know about, the work, how it all ties into the role of advocacy, exploring these connections and histories and everything like that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to share. I've had the honor of participating in an exhibition which only launched this past Friday at the Dr. Sun Yat-sen Classical Chinese Garden here in Vancouver, Chinatown. And it's part of a year-long program called Solidarity. So this first exhibition, Rivers Have Mouths, brings together local Indigenous artists from our host nations, Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh, along with 3 Chinese Canadian artists. And the vision behind this exhibition and this program is for these artists to come together and create pieces that will encourage the public to think about how we can come together and how the issues that Indigenous and Asian communities are facing today are not new, in the sense that we have been struggling, but also supporting one another, as the Grants have told in their story, for many hundreds of years now. And so we can pull inspiration and strength from those historical connections and hopefully apply those teachings into how we relate to one another today. And so that exhibition just opened, and I think each of the artists, which include a weaver, a carver, a visual painter, a whole mixture of media, have really brought the stories of their family and their communities out in unique ways. So it's really exciting to see how it came together, and we invite people to visit this summer.
So exciting. Oh my goodness. I would love to go as soon as I can. I guess I know we're a little short on time. I have one more question for the both of you prepared. I don't know if again anyone else wants to ask any. Last chance. But my question for the both of you is, you know, both Autumn Tigers and all our father's relations, you know, it adds to such an important dialogue that is so pertinent right now with, you know, current events happening, but also, like you said, it's been happening for a long time. And it's awesome. Like I personally, like as a Filipino, you know, like I love seeing these kinds of conversations happen and like talking about that systemic, the historical aspects of all of these things, you know, like it's not just, oh, this happened, you know, back in the 40s. All done now, congrats. But I wonder, you know, both your works have, you know, they've added so much, right, to the dialogue and everything. And I wonder, do you think that there's a specific place where more work has to be done, either from maybe a scholarly perspective, because I know both of you are very research based, or like a community perspective or a cultural perspective? If, you know, there's one thing that audience members and myself, we can like take away from both Autumn Tigers and All Our Fathers Relations.
Well, I think like, yeah, it's a really good question. It's hard to like say specifically what aspect, but I mean, and this might be the cop-out answer, but I think like any aspect, scholarly, through, I guess in my case, like artistic, also definitely through community-based aspects. It's important because all these issues, and they're not just like one-sided, you know, kind of straightforward kind of thing that you can approach. And I think by taking sort of, you know, these different angles and adding them to the conversation, it makes it a much richer experience. It adds and contributes to, I guess in a way, like the dialogue contributes to the archives. It counters, you know, official narratives. So yeah.
For sure, for sure. Like it's a 360 kind of deal that we need here with how deeply ingrained everything is, for sure.
Well, there's definitely, you know, a large number of gaps that I think still need to be filled in terms of what we would regard as the hidden histories. But I think there's still quite a lot of work that could be done to, you know, recenter intercultural histories. I think you can see quite easily the fractures that colonial policies have created, and there are still many remnants and impacts of that. But I think what I've noticed, at least over the past decade or so, are more communities and individuals reclaiming their stories and sharing the ways in which they had connections with other cultures that you know, weren't legal at the time or weren't encouraged by mainstream society. And so I think the Chinese Musqueam connection is just one of many that we see across BC and Canada. So I'm hoping that, you know, more and more will continue to come out over the years.
Fingers crossed. That's the goal. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you both. That was perfect timing, just turned 8 o'clock. But thank you both really so much for coming out tonight. Karen, thank you for staying up with us. But thank you for your energy, and also just not just for tonight, but everything that you put into both of your work, your continued careers and everything you offer to society. Honestly, like really, really thank you. Again, Sarah and Karen, thank you so much for coming. That's all I have for you tonight.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Karen and
Thank
Sarah.
you, everyone.